Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Nicholas and today I'm going to be working on my 1961 Imperial. I will be pulling the heads off the 413 as well as pulling the starter. I will also be going into why I'm pulling the heads, as that was not the original plan of how far I was going into the car. But the car does have 80,000 miles, and then there's some other things that are kind of questionable. I think it's just better to do now and address the issues while I have the car apart and not while everything nice and new is on the engine and gets destroyed from hot coolant or hot oil. So I've also been doing a ton of work off camera. A lot of the parts that have been removed, I have fully detailed, fully cleaned, fully painted, fully stripped, everything like that. And they're ready to go back on the car. Obviously, I can't put it back together until I get to the final step of pulling everything off that I want to pull off. So the next few steps are going to be pulling the heads, pulling the timing cover and the oil pan, doing the rear main seal, and then going through that whole mess up there just so that I can get to the base of everything and make sure everything is intact, like the timing chain and everything like that. And then we'll move forward with reassembly of the engine. Now, I will discuss a little bit more about the heads in this video because I want to talk about that and the things that I've found. But I have pulled things like the manifolds and stuff like that off camera. Now, I would like to show some of the stuff that I've done off camera, just so you have an idea that it's not just me pulling stuff off and then it's going to be going back on. There's a lot more work that's gone into this car off camera than there has been on camera. So let's take a look at some of that stuff and again, kind of the contributing factors of why I'm wanting to pull the heads now. All right, so first things up, we've got our power steering pump, all nice and pretty. It is painted silver, which was original. Still need the power steering bumper, and that's an issue that'll get discussed in a future video. But fully new seals, everything like that. Here's the valve cover, driver's side. Again, they're not perfect, kind of dusty, need to be washed, but they came out all right. A lot of this stuff gets bead blasted or wire wheeled and then fully stripped and then primed and painted. The manifold. The manifolds I've already done. They've been completely smoothed. As you can see, there's no casting marks there, anything like that. A lot of these little sprues and sprouts ground down flush. The casting marks along the edge here have been smoothed out, resurfaced, and they look all right. They're not the most perfect thing in the world, but they're a lot better than they were when I pulled them off. So a lot of this stuff I don't want to just throw back on and then, end up destroying the edge of the paint because it's constantly leaking oil or anything like that. Although I know this paint is oil resistant, I still don't want to take a chance with it, especially with I got the stickers on it and everything. It's just not worth it. All right, now what we have here is the 1961 Imperial's inner fender on the driver's side. You can see it's fully painted and redone. This guy took a lot of work actually. I wanted to keep the original paint, but it was just too rusty and a lot of the paint was missing already, so I wasn't able to keep it. Now, I did do the best I could with color matching. This color is not, you can't just go get it anymore. You have to have it specifically color matched. And I also did paint onto a white epoxy primer and not a red oxide primer. So the color is slightly different, even though it kind of is the same color, it's just on a different primer. So it's going to come out to a different color anyways, but it's black on the back side. There's some overspray on it, but it is a wheel well at the end of the day. Now this does bring me to the next thing here, the wheel, or one of the wheels for the Imperial, which was painted by the channel sponsor ProTech Powder Coating. If you have any powder coating needs, feel free to reach out to them and get a quote on some stuff. They do really good work and there's proof of it right here. And you can see just how clear a lot of this powder coating is, and really where you start to define if powder coating is good or not and whoever's doing it is all of the seams, especially on wheels, the seams between the inner disc and the inner barrel. So you can tell that they did a really good job. They put a lot of prep work into it, and that's what's most important in powder coating. So again, thank you to ProTech for sponsoring the channel and being able to do some cool stuff like this with these wheels, because this powder coating's pretty. Now I do have one more thing I'd like to show. It's not necessarily related to the Imperial, but again, it's on the stream of doing work off camera. So let's get into that. All right, one final thing before we move on to the rest of the video. What we have here is the oil fill plate for the Series 61 Monarch. I've already redone it, stripped it and everything. Nickel plated, a little fill plug, a bevel area, whatever you want to call it, and then just polish the brass so it looks nice. I haven't stripped any of the Gliptol paint on the inside, as it seems in pretty good condition. And then I haven't stripped these edges yet, but I will before I seal them. I want those as clean as possible, so I'm just waiting. This guy's your feed chart. I've already gone ahead and restored this. The plates came out really clean, especially for, you know, the damaged parts and stuff like that. These are usually torn up for no reason. I don't know why, they always are. But it came out really nice. I did strip all the Bondo, so that's why it's got that edge like that. I did nickel plate the gears, so all this stuff is refinished and shouldn't have any corrosion issues in the future. But again, there's some work that I haven't shown on camera. I will be showing some stuff like this, so please subscribe if you want to see any content like this of restoring plates. Just stay tuned for more videos on the Monarch and more machinery and all that cool stuff. So let's get into the main content of the video of pulling the heads. So part of the reason that I was going to be pulling, or I'm going to be pulling the heads, is a few things. So first, the freeze plugs or expansion plugs, whatever you want to call them, they are all inverted, which means someone's been working on this engine before. I don't know if it was because it overheated or anything like that, but there's definitely been work to the engine in that manner. The exhaust manifolds did not have any gaskets. So again, someone has been pulling the stuff off the side of the engine to work on it. The radiator, also, the brackets were completely unsoldered. So that is completely possible to happen on its own, but it's more likely that they experienced a lot of heat. So again, I don't know if this car is overheated, but I don't want to take the risk, because you've seen the inner fenders, which sit right here. If I do have a coolant leak or an oil leak or something like that, it could easily get on the fenders and all that stuff. So I don't want to have any issues in that sense. So it's super easy to just pull these off and have them resurfaced and then go from there, and then I don't have any issues. I also, when I was pulling the manifold off of the driver's side, I found a ton of acorns crammed in that manifold. And there are still some in the exhaust ports and intake ports, which means it could, in theory, have squirrel like nuts and fur and all that cool stuff inside. So I kind of like to make sure there's none in there. I've already bore scoped it out, but that only does so much. So pulling the heads will give me a better opportunity to see and make sure nothing's wrong, as well as, you know, clean the tops of the pistons and all that cool stuff and make sure there's no really bad scoring. So I'm generally not in the, you know, the mood of like just pulling it, because now I'm pulling the heads. Well, why don't I pull the motor at this point? And you start going down that rabbit hole. I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to do this in a smart way and more calculated. But it makes sense to pull these just to be safe, especially because it's not very expensive to have heads done. So just simple things of remembering where stuff's at is important, specifically the spark plug protectors and stuff like that. But everything's coming off. I will be leaving the valves in, as the machinist has requested that I leave the valves in for him. So just to make it easier on them, we'll do it that way. Sometimes you can get away with pulling the valves yourselves, but it's all dependent on who you take it to. So let's get started on pulling the exhaust studs out and the spark plugs, and then we'll move on to actually getting into pulling the heads. All right, double check that we got all of the bolts out. And then one big heave. All right, we're unstuck. Now we just climb up in here and grab the head. All right, now we have access to our head gasket, and there is something in here. Looks like some calcified coolant, which means they were running tap water. Pretty normal. It does appear to have the original head gasket. I don't see any leaks right off the bat. So here we are. You can see there's some crap down in a lot of the bores. We have quite the bit of carbon. So overall, it does look pretty clean. Here's the calcified areas I was referring to. We just clean this out the best we can with a wire wheel. You can see there's some residue from the old oil. Nice and clean oil. That's sarcastic, of course. And then here's some of our cooling jacket ports, which aren't too bad, to be honest, but they are clogged. I probably would have had overheating issues in certain areas of the block if I just ran this, so I'm kind of glad I did this. I mean, look at that. A lot of that probably would have blown through, but some of these maybe not so much. Oh my God, look at that. So we got some cleaning up to do, clearly, but we're gonna go pull the other side and then go examine the head and see what that all looks like. But I'm already happy I'm pulling these. All right, I'm not gonna worry anymore about these exhaust studs, but you can see here some pecans, and they're down in the valve bowl. So same over here. I kind of expect to see maybe some pecans or leaves in the inside the cylinders. So now we're gonna do the same thing. Remove these head bolts and we'll see what she looks like. Part. I'll be snaking this guy out. It isn't popping up like the last one, so I think we have a better seal over here. Still got some water in the head too. This front side letting go. Oh, maybe because I didn't remove the bolts. Whoops. All right. Now, should come off. All right. Make sure we got a good path here. Of course, it's gonna catch on this bracket. Let's take a look at this side. You can see there's quite a bit of carbon down in there. And there is some This is all stuff from that cylinder. So I'm really happy I pulled these heads. They clearly needed it. It looks like the block was maybe stored with water. As you can see there, that looks like it might have been the water level. But man, this thing is carboned up. Not the worst in the world, but definitely could have been better. So there's still water in here. So I need to address that. There might be a blockage somewhere because I have flushed this before. So again, same issue on this side. We got some calcium deposits in here. So that, I guess, could have been from them running water, or maybe not enough antifreeze in the mix. So I'm not sure, but let's go take a look at the, actually, no. Let's pull the starter real quick, enjoy this mess, and then we'll get moving on looking at the heads. All right, now that I've got the starter out, I'm not gonna rebuild it in this video. I will in another video. Just lock washers stuck to it. This thing is pretty greasy, as you can see all the crap coming off. So first of all, to check this, I'm just gonna do a quick check, make sure it's actually working. And we're gonna basically decide if we wanna get a new one or not. I'm sure it's fine, and we can rebuild anything that's broken, but the first thing we're going to check is continuity. Check the ground to the case. So we got good ground across everything. Check the solenoid. There we go. Solenoid has a good ground, which is the most important part. So now we can check for proper use. So we're gonna hook a 12-volt source up to it, directly to this guy, and then just ground it anywhere on the case. And then we just need to apply 12 volts there and this thing will kick over. So let's set that up so we can test it. All right, so now when you're testing a starter, you can obviously clamp it to a table like I have right here. I got a C-clamp right here, and then it's just got a clamp. You wanna make sure it ain't gonna move, or you could just put your foot on it and test it, but for the sake of the video, I have it clamped to the table. So what we're gonna do is hook our 12 volts up to it. Wanna make sure the case is ground. Apply 12 volts to the starter post, if I can get the thing to stay, like so. And then just take a little jumper wire from this 12 volt source right here, which is hooked up to a battery. You'll just contact it to the solenoid post. You don't want to run it a long time because especially with something this small of a wire, I don't want to burn it up. So we're just trying to test it. So we're just going to touch it to that post with the positive source, and it should move if everything's working correctly. One more time. All right, we know the starter works. Then we just disconnect our power, make sure it's isolated. We're good to go. So that's a really good sign. I'm still gonna take it apart and clean everything and go through the starter to make sure everything's intact, clean it up, get all this junk off this guy and clean all that stuff out. I mean, it is packed. So still gonna do an overhaul on it, make sure everything's perfect, but we at least know the starter's working condition before we take everything apart. So let's move on to the heads and do a quick inspection on those and see what really needs to be done on them. All right, so there's a few things when we're working on a head that we need to keep in mind. Obviously, machine work is not just cheap. It can be fairly cheap at times, but a good quality machinist isn't always the cheapest. So we also need to determine what needs to be done to this head so that we are not just wasting our money and having the heads completely done for no reason. Because an educated guess is a lot better than just a guess. So there's a few things that we notice when we're looking at the valve train. We want to make sure that none of the springs are broken. The valves aren't just like wobbling around, like the guides are completely worn. If the guides are completely worn, you can sometimes get away with just moving the valve completely around, even with the valve seated like it is. The spring should move like that. It shouldn't be bound up. It's not going to be easy to move, but we can tell by just looking at it that there's no like major issues with the valves. There is one with rust on it. Don't know what that means, whether that valve was down when the car was put up and stored. So a lot of the rust could have also been removed after turning it over a couple times. So now we take a look here at the exhaust ports. Don't see anything sticking out right at us. Lots of carbon. All the studs came out, none of them broke for the exhaust, so that was nice. Looking at the intake runners, these are a bit longer, so need to look down in with a flashlight. Again, lots of carbon, oddly enough, which could have meant it was running poorly. It doesn't have a PCV valve, so it technically shouldn't be breathing anything recirculating wise. Now, if we take a look here at the compression or the combustion chamber head, you can see that things are a little bit built up with carbon. So before we do any testing on the valves, we're going to do a quick do-over and get the carbon off, just the big stuff, not everything. And just make sure that we have a nice clean surface so that when we're doing our testing. We're also looking for rust. This guy right here is a little bit rusty, and I would assume that is because this valve was maybe open when it was stored, so which could have led to water getting left inside the block. Now if we take a look here, this is our oil ports that go up to our rockers right here. You can see it's filled with old oil, which is just an indication that, you know, it's all sludged up. So that means we need to clean the oil galleries nice and perfect before we put everything back together. So let's scrape the head clean real quick with just a razor blade, wipe it down, maybe take a little bit of Scotch-Brite. I'm already going to have it resurfaced, so I don't care about ruining the head surface, but I just want to get it cleaned up so that when we're inspecting this, we're not taking into account like carbon deposits and stuff like that. So let me get to that. All right, so we've gotten the head cleaned up just a little bit. Nothing crazy here. And we're going to take a scale that we know is semi-straight in terms of it's going to be a good edge to reference off of. Now, this isn't a big enough scale technically in terms of trying to measure the entire head, but we're just going to take a couple measurements, if you will, across the head. We just have it on our side like so, on its side like so, and we're going to shine a light behind the scale as we're getting gaps everywhere. It definitely needs to be resurfaced. Make sure you do some angles. It's not terrible, but it is warped. This is the passenger side head as well, which did kind of pop up on its own without me having to really do a lot of work. So I don't know if that means someone's already had this apart or what, but it definitely, it's warped. So it's not terrible, like I said, but we do know it needs to be resurfaced. Now we're going to flip the head over, reinstall the spark plugs real quick, and then we're going to test the valves. All right, now that we have the spark plugs back in, we're we're going to support the head so that the valves are not in contact. The valve stem itself is not in contact with the table that we're working off of. And so that we know that there's no forces just pushing the valves directly back up. Now we're going to take a very, very thin liquid like gasoline, kerosene, anything like that, and we're going to rest it in these valves just so that we can blow air coming onto the valve, and we'll know if it's leaking or not. So let's set that up so we can get ready to test. All right, now that we have the fluid sitting in the combustion head, we're going to take a towel, some compressed air, and we're going to plug the port up with our nozzle, and then you just blow into it. All right, now to check the middle, we need to take another towel. We're going to plug the opposite port that we're working on. Stick the nozzle in and close off the crossover tube. I don't see anything in that one. Swap towels over to the other port. This one's leaking pretty well. Let's move to this end. No leaks. Now we do the intakes. Leaking a little bit. That one's leaking as well. That one's leaking. All right, so all of our intake valves are pretty much leaking. So kind of expected, to be honest. Now we just need to sop it up, and now we know the valves do need to be reground. So we're not just guessing on what needs to be done. So let's take a look at the driver's side head, and then we'll finish things up. All right, now the driver's side head, same thing as before. Take a look at everything. Does any of it look abnormal? The answer is no. This one actually kind of looks better, if I'm going to be honest. Until we get into here, in which case this cylinder had some rust in it, it looks like. So it's not perfect. Again, clogged with oil. So let's flip it over. Everything looks good inside. So nothing looks wrong with our valves. Doesn't look like there's any cracks. All right, so now we've cleaned up the head enough. We're gonna take a look at the flatness of it. Remember, this is not a exact check here. We're just trying to see if there is any major warping going on. Which this one does appear to be fairly all right. There's just a little bit here and there. Nothing major. So definitely needs to be resurfaced though. It's here, not worrying about it. So let's take a check, or do a check here on our valves. Let's start with the middle exhaust ports. Yep, it's leaking. Swap sides. That one appears to be all right. Okay, that one's not even remotely sealing. Neither is that. That's really bad. All right, let's check the intake. Not bad. Really good. Bad. And bad. It's really only 3 valves that were all right. So now we know that most of the valves need to be reground. There is a chance that there could be trash trapped in between the valve and the valve seat, but still, I'm here. There's too many that are leaking right now. There's a chance that they could seat enough, but with 80,000 miles on the car, they're probably worn. So it's just super easy to do it now while it's apart and not have to worry about it. Well, that about does it for this video. We got a lot done. There were some things that I thought would be a little bit more difficult, like the starter ended up not being so difficult. There's still some things that need to be addressed on the engine, such as pulling the timing cover and the oil pan and going through that whole mess. And then I will be changing the freeze plugs as well. So there's still some stuff that needs to be addressed on the engine, as well as pulling the fuel tank and then getting the rest of the lines out, like the brake lines and stuff like that, so I can start redoing them in stainless. So we're getting there. Still a lot of still some stuff that needs to be accomplished yet, but hoping to have it driving soon. Now that being said, some future videos will be coming out on the D500, the C800, as well as the 2 L1000s. I have a lot of work left on those trucks as well. So stay tuned for stuff on that, as well as all the machining videos. I still have a lot of work on the machinery left to go. So obviously a lot of projects, but I appreciate you staying around to this point and staying with me through this. To everyone that has subscribed to my channel, I really appreciate it, as well as anyone who's commented or liked my videos. I really appreciate it. It does help drive my channel and get it to a bigger audience, which is the end goal, is to hopefully help a lot more people. So thank you if you've gotten to this point. I hope you enjoyed your holidays, that everyone had some good family meals, and y'all stay safe out there and have a blessed one.